a gap in this pattern of how they're being fired, right? I just can't make that jump. But these clouds are being fired by these cannons, and one of them is immune to being rewound, right? And all the clouds that it fires are also sparkling and are also immune. And what that means is if I rewind a little bit, some of the clouds will rewind and other ones won't. And they phase shift with respect to each other, and I can actually set them up evenly spaced. And then I can make my way across pretty easily and get the little puzzle piece, right? So that's an example of the kind of puzzles that are in that world. And I was just kind of like on fire when I was doing this prototype, and I was like, well, what if time manipulation wasn't just down to you rewinding things, right? What if we collapsed it into space? So in this world, if you don't move, time just stands still, right? If you move to the right, time goes forward, and that little monster is walking around in the way that usually happens. And if I walk to the left, time goes backward, right? This is actually, almost this exact level was in my original prototype. I like the idea of Donkey Kong because it forces you to zigzag left and right, which in this paradigm of time behavior means time is going to go forward and backward, right? So guys get shot out of his cannon and sucked back up and whatever. That's kind of cool. And then interesting, conundra arise naturally from this behavior, right? I was looking for puzzles that aren't contrived. I think situations that could arise naturally that would be interesting for the player to figure out. So I want to climb up here, up this ladder to get that puzzle piece at the top. But I can't, because this guy is like blocking me, right? But, you know, the ladder is clear when I'm over here, but just anytime I'm standing at this horizontal position, he's going to be in the way, right? So how do I get past him, or how do I kill him so I can get up to get that thing, right? So that's the kind of puzzle that world's based on. So those three worlds that I just showed you, the fundamental like prototype programming for those was all done in a week. Like obviously this version is a lot more polished and stuff, and I'm using this one instead of the prototype because it's easier to navigate. Like I have all the cheat keys in it and stuff. But you know, all these puzzles were in there, and I sent it out to my friends, and they loved the game. And it was like, well, dude, you have to make this game. And I'm like, all right. I'll show you one more that was not in the prototype, but that was done several months later. There's a few more worlds in the actual game. In this one, so you know, in most of these worlds, when you rewind something, it essentially gets undone, and you get to redo something new. Well, one idea was, hey, if you decide to rewind some things that you did, what if they don't get entirely undone, but they live on in a parallel reality, right? Because like, hey, I've read lots of science fiction and parallel realities and stuff. So what can you do with that? Well, maybe you have these sparkling objects that exist in both realities, right? So this switch here, if it gets manipulated in one reality, it gets manipulated in both, and that gives rise to a wide family of interesting puzzles. So, you know, if I try to solve this in a mundane way, I'm trying to climb up there and get that puzzle piece, and I'm trying to get through the door, but I can't get through. But like, hey, maybe if I go throw the switch, but then decide, actually, I didn't really want to throw that switch, so I rewind, but it still happened in some alternate universe, and now I can actually get through, right? So this is just to give you the flavor of this game. I'm not going to go through anymore, because there's a lot more to say. That was a really great experience. And even after the initial prototype phase, to go back to this always be prototyping idea, I found that the rest of the game, even when I was supposedly in production, was a great test bed for prototyping ideas, because there were all these different worlds with different behaviors of time, and I could play with them independently, right? I could have an idea like, what if when you rewind it still happens in a parallel universe, and I could try a couple different ways of making that happen and see how it fits into the rest of the game. That was pretty cool. You know, there were a couple of modes that got cut because they didn't give rise to natural enough or deep enough puzzles. I won't explain those for now. After all that was done, right, I had the game fully playable from end to end, you know, 85 puzzles in it or something. They were all cool. I still hadn't managed to find an artist for it. This was kind of a historical accident because I wanted an artist at the beginning. Like, cell phones distract me sometimes. Right, so this game was playable from end to end, and it was time to enter it in the IDF, and it didn't have any art, and I did. And so it won this game design prize, which was pretty cool, right? So people sort of responded to the gameplay, even though it still had programmer art. But then it was time to do the art, and we've been working on that, and because the game was just made out of like blocks, like you saw in that initial prototype, it was actually a little bit better looking at that time. but still you went through all these worlds that were basically like stone slabs and whatever. But that meant the gameplay was very clear, right? In a platformer, especially a puzzle platformer like this, there's some specific things you want to know, like where can I stand before I fall off this ledge, right? Can I make it across this jump or not? Like, how clear is that to me without having to try and fail as a player? Those are things that make a player very comfortable and confident in the game design, right? And what we noticed when we started adding art to the game was we would screw up some of those things, like, oh, this grass texture makes it ambiguous where you can stand, and it's bad. Or you can't tell in this world the difference between the foreground and the background sometimes. And you have to go bump into things to know if you can walk there. And it diluted player confidence. So because we had this example of what was essentially a later stage prototype without any art, but cool gameplay, that helped us do all the art. And the art was this, again, this third stage like prototyping process of, let's try this style. No, it interferes with the gameplay. Let's try this, let's try that. Right? This is another victory I consider for always be prototyping, because I really love the way that the game came out in terms of visual art in the end, and it does not interfere with the gameplay. The core gameplay still survives. I'm going to go on and talk about some other prototypes now. So as I said, this gameplay, or Braid was gameplay complete in about late 1995. And early 96, I was thinking about, hey, what should my next game be? And I decided, I like this prototyping thing. I'm going to do it some more. So even though I wasn't done with Braid, these games are multi-year development processes or extravaganzas, right? And it takes so much concentration over so much time to do them. Sometimes you need a break. And so I decided, hey, if I need a break once in a while, I'll just take a week and I'll go do one of these super creative, like super intense. I'm still in the honeymoon phase with this new design and not trying to polish it up. And work as hard as I can on a new thing, and then I'll come back to Braid and work on it some more. And that was highly successful. So I'm going to show you this game called Raspberry now. If I can find it. This game was an attempt to create gameplay that sort of feels like music, which is a vague thing to describe. And I'm going to have to talk pretty quickly once I actually start the game. So prior to that, I'll just say there's a few different channels of variation between what happens in this game. There's what I'm trying to do as the player. We'll shift back and forth between a couple of things. There's like the size of the targets that I'm trying to hit is going to become small and big, and that's going to make me feel different in the way that they move. And the goal of this game was to change those things around in patterns, maybe even call and response patterns, the way music works. So I'm just going to play this for a second so that you can get a feel of it. My goal in this part of the game is to keep the blue dots on the left-hand side and the green dots on the right-hand side. And if they're on the right side, they put out these little green sparkles, which give me positive points. If they're on the wrong side, they put out red sparkles, and that reduces my score, which is sort of displayed in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. Now the gameplay is shifting, and it's switched into this mode where I'm actually not pushing the dots at all, but I'm trying to touch them and match similar colors with my mouse cursor. And when I do that, they pop, and I get points. And now it's shifted back, right? Now I'm playing this move the dots around kind of thing again. And now they're getting smaller, which means that they're easier to push, but they also probably move faster on average, so I have to be a little bit more of a spaz. They get pushed by a little bit of invisible force coming out of your thing, so it might be hard to see. Now the dots are really small, which means I have to be kind of tweaky about trying to hit them. It's not easy like it was before. I'm matching colors again. They get big, so you'll notice I have this thing in the lower right corner of the screen that's about showing you what's coming up next in this sort of song that's playing. It's actually really hard to pay attention to that legitimately while you're playing. But so now things are going into a spiral, which sort of changes the mood, and it changes that part of your brain that's engaged about predicting where the dots are going to go, because they had this bouncing pattern for a while, and now they have this like sort of spiraling pattern. So I'm going to go up here and kind of try to block these guys crossing across. And then this is going to switch into like a last mode, which is about staying as far away from these guys as I can. And I have this halo around me that gets small if I'm too close and big if I'm far. And I get the green sparkles when I'm far. So my goal is to move around. There's a little bit more to that one, but that's all I'm going to show you for now. I found that to be a really cool game. Like, it didn't actually, at the end of that week, I felt that it did not succeed at my goal of feeling like music and would not. It's actually the song that made it feel like music. The patterns of the actual gameplay changed around too slowly in order to really give me that feeling of call and response and stuff. But what I did get out of this was, again, a feeling that I never had out of another game.